Well, I believe that the authorities, in fact, hasn't the Premier made a pronouncement on this? He doesn't want people to camp out. If you turn up on Friday, go home on Friday night, come back on Saturday. I think that's how it's going to work, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think what the Premier said and what the police have been indicating to us are two totally different things, and I think I really think that the Premier has got a little bit of the wrong idea about what our intentions were in regard to camping out. I got the feeling from listening to him talk yesterday that he thought we were going to try and camp out somewhere that might block the motorcade or cause some kind of disruption to the Choggin action. And look, Occupy Perth have got no intention whatsoever of going anywhere near the motorcades or anything which might disrupt the Choggin action. So the police yesterday, Inspector Woods, met with a couple of our police liaisons, and his indication to us was, and I quote, that the police were very relaxed about our plans to occupy overnight on Friday and Saturday. And like Mr. Barnett said, ultimately the decision comes down to the West Australian Police, who will be on the ground at the time.
You are who are responsible to the Minister, who's, I suppose, responsible to the Premier. This is just, if you don't mind, Luke, we'll have a listen to what the Premier did say on this matter.
They're peaceful and just protesting in a peaceful way, they'll be allowed to continue to do so, but they will not be allowed to disrupt events.
Is an Occupy considered peaceful?
Depends how it's conducted. If they're just sitting there quietly with a couple of banners, that's okay.
So what about setting up camps there with
mattresses? No, people won't be setting up camps.
So 3 days in Forest Place, they'll be moving on?
Well, look, that's going to be handled by the police, but we will not be allowing people to set up camps. They can stay there, sit on the ground if they want to, and peacefully protest.
And will they be dragged away like they were in Sydney and Melbourne, or will we see them removed like that if the turn's not peaceful?
The police, look, that's an operational matter for the police, and the West Australian Police take prime responsibility in that area. But if people behave in an orderly, quiet protest, they will be left to do that. If they disrupt the public, then they will be removed. But that decision will be made on the spot by the senior police.
Sounds to me, Luke, as if police are under orders not to let you camp. I think twice in that interview the Premier indicated that camping would not be allowed in Forest Place.
Yeah, look, he said no pitching of tents himself, but the police have not said this directly to us. And I mean, if that
no, but the Premier has. He happens to call the shots.
Well, maybe he does to some degree, but we also live in a country where he doesn't call the shots independently all upon his own decisions, you know. So we have a system of law in place, and we also have, you know, parliamentary process and all of those things. Anyway, when it comes what's the benefit of camping overnight? Does it make a lot of difference if you had to move on Friday night and come back on Saturday? Would that be a problem? I am unsure about whether it would be a problem. Look, none of us want to have any problems if there is going to be a move-on order. I think it will probably be complied with for the most part. But, you know, there's a thing to show that we are here with pushing a lot of support behind this idea. And over in New York, they've been camping out overnight, and all around the world. So we don't see any reason why.
Just refresh
if they're allowed to elsewhere, we shouldn't be allowed to in this country that so claims to be one of the world leaders in civil liberties, which we generally are. So,
well, we'll see what happens on the weekend, of course. Luke, just refresh our memories. Exactly why are you all gathering in the one place at the one time? What are you protesting about?
There's a lot of different things and a lot of different reasons why individuals are involved in the Occupy movement. But in Wall Street, I think there's, you know, 3 very clear levels where things are, people have concerns. One, I guess the Wall Street thing where it all started. A lot of it comes back to the financial crisis and the fact that all around the world, mayhap not so much in Australia, but when there was a financial crisis created by essentially misuse of money by extremely wealthy people, the response around the globe was to take trillions, literally trillions of dollars of public money that, you know, comes from taxpayers like you and I, and pretty much hand it directly over to the bankers, and there was very little accountability, and very few, or if any, of the bankers responsible for the financial crisis were ever prosecuted or put through the law system in the US. Certainly we support that idea.
Do you and your fellow protesters have an economic background? Because you're talking like an economist, Luke.
I personally do have some background in economics, yes. I study politics at uni, and my minor is in economics.
Good.
And there are lots of professional people involved in the Occupy Perth movement, and even, around the world there is thousands of professionals, millions of people involved in the Occupy movement. So
if you're protesting against the global financial crisis, there might be those, Luke, who'll say is more or less protesting something after the horse is well and truly bolted.
Look, we're not just protesting the global financial crisis. Like I said, there's a lot of different issues here. That's just one of the key ones.
Can you run through some of them quickly for us?
Okay, so on a local perspective in Australia, one of the key issues regarding wealth inequality, which is the main point of the Occupy problem, is this issue of the cost of housing in this country. I'm not a complaining type. I've worked hard my whole life. My fiancée and I bought a house when I was aged 20, and I've been working full time since I was 17. And but in order for any Australian citizen, any average Australian citizen earning an average Australian income to buy a house, it's impossible for them to save up with their own money and buy a house without getting a mortgage. Now, effectively, that means that when you want to buy a house, when you want to get the chance to live what is the Australian dream, you have to agree to get a mortgage, which is effectively, especially with the price of houses these days, agreeing to sign over hundreds of thousands of your hard-earned dollars to people that already have more than enough money. Our house cost $330,000 when we bought it, and it was quite a cheap house. By the time we finished paying it off at the recommended rate that the bank suggested, with current interest rates and all of these kinds of things, you're looking at $880,000.
You should have been around when I was buying a house when the mortgage rate's about 18 to 20%. But look, we get the point, Luke. So if you want to protest about anything like that, Friday, as far as you're concerned, and Saturday is the time to do it at Forest Place, and we do thank you for your time.
Cool, thank you very much,
Luke.
Harvey.
Luke
Bye.
Skinner is a spokesman for Occupy Perth, and keeping a very, very close eye on those protesters, and anyone else who wishes to protest will be WA Police. We're joined now by Chris Dawson, who's a Deputy Police Commissioner and pretty much in charge of security over Choggum. Good morning, Mr Dawson.
Good morning, Harvey.
You heard what Luke Skinner had to say. Maybe you didn't. I know you've been in a series of meetings this morning, but in case you missed the interview, we seem to have a bit of a sticking point about whether or not these protesters will be allowed to camp overnight on Friday night at Forest Place. The Premier twice yesterday in the one interview suggested that they wouldn't be allowed to. What is the police view on this?
Well, look, we'll talk to the group that want to protest there. We've been talking to them for quite some months, actually. We've always said we live in a democracy, and there's no law per se against protesting. The important thing and the role for police is not to stifle anyone wanting to state their cause, but to make sure that things are done peacefully and lawfully. But there are City of Perth bylaws in terms of where people can camp. So City of Perth have some jurisdiction over Forest Place, for instance. So again, we're engaged with City of Perth. Well, look, there's a lot of issues associated with it. I think the important message we've been consistently saying, and saying it for quite a long time, is the role for police here is to make sure that people are kept safe. We're not in the business of trying to stop people able to state what their cause or their protest is, but they've got to do it lawfully. And if it's unlawful to, pitch tents or sorts of things on all sorts of property, well, they're the sorts of issues that we'll have to have a discussion with them about.
Indeed you will. Now, let's get on to this exclusion notice that has been served on a number of people, including Seamus Doherty, whose photo's in the paper this morning on the front page, and he was on Howard Sattler's program yesterday. We're a bit curious, Mr Dawson, how do you make that list, and what's the cut-off point below which you don't get an exclusion notice, but you still might be a protester? What's the criteria?
Well, look, the law is provided under the Commonwealth Heads of Government Special Powers Act, which was passed by Parliament. Now, I'll just say as a preface to this, this is not as an excuse, but just to properly explain, my role and the role of police is not to advocate or to be apologists for law. We have to apply the law and apply it fairly. The power does sit in that act. It's an act that is in place specifically for Choggum, and it expires on the 5th of November. But in that Act, it does provide that the Commissioner or his delegate can, if they're satisfied that a person may pose a serious threat to the safety of persons or property in a Choggum security area, provide that there's an excluded persons list. A list has been prepared. We're not going to publicly state who those people are. We're not in the business of actually doing that, but we have to, by law, make proper arrangements and let those people know. Now, if they decide to identify themselves, they're at liberty to do so.
Has anyone dared to breach the exclusion notice yet?
There is a male person, 37-year-old, appearing in the Perth Magistrates Court this morning. Yesterday afternoon, he was charged under that Act for unauthorised entry to a travel and security area. He was served with papers and indeed a map yesterday, in about 2 hours' time, charged with that offence.
What's the penalty?
The penalty is up to 12 months imprisonment, but penalties for courts to determine. So that's a matter for the court.
Mr Dawson, just one final question in regard to Mr Doherty. We read today that there were 4 coppers turned up to serve one notice on him. Was that a bit of overkill?
Oh, I don't know the particularity of that. There may be other reasons why. Maybe they were going somewhere else at the time too. I don't know the answer. Normally we do those sort of things in pairs, but I don't know why there were 4. There may be other reasons I haven't been briefed on. All
right, well, you're a busy man. We do appreciate your time this morning, Mr
Thanks,
Dawson.
Harvey.
That's Chris Dawson. He's the Deputy Police Commissioner. Busy day. It's 13 to 9. We'll take a break.
Up to the minute 6PR Perth traffic. For Thrifty Car Rental, we'll move you.
Just had word of a crash on the Kwinana Freeway southbound on the Mount Henry Bridge. All